At 70 years old, Mel Gibson has reached a point in life where looking back feels unavoidable. Time has softened some edges and sharpened others, leaving behind clarity that only comes after decades of success, mistakes, loss, and survival. Long before the fame, the awards, and the controversies, Mel Gibson's story began in a crowded household far from Hollywood. He was born on January 3, 1956, in Peekskill, New York, the sixth of 11 children in a large Irish Catholic family. His upbringing was strict, deeply rooted in faith, discipline, and strong beliefs. These early influences shaped the way he saw the world, for better and for worse, and would later echo throughout his career and personal life. In 1968, when Mel was just 12 years old, his family made a life-changing decision, seeking distance from social unrest in America during the Vietnam War era. And following his father's legal settlement, the family moved to Sydney, Australia. Australia became the place where Gibson found his identity, his voice, and eventually his calling. Though acting was not his dream at first, fate had other plans. He enrolled at the National Institute of Dramatic Art, known as NIDA, almost by accident. What stood out immediately was not polish or charm, but raw emotion. Gibson had intensity. He could express pain, anger, fear, and vulnerability in ways that felt real. After graduating, he worked in theater and small films, slowly building a reputation as someone who did not hold back. His breakout moment came in 1979 with Mad Max, a low-budget Australian film that unexpectedly became a worldwide success. Overnight, Gibson transformed from a struggling actor into an international star. His portrayal of Max Rokitansky, a broken man navigating a violent, collapsing world, redefined what an action hero could be. He was not clean or invincible. He was wounded, angry, and human. The success of Mad Max and its sequels made Gibson a global name. But it was his ability to balance toughness with sensitivity that truly set him apart. Films like Gallipoli showed another side of him, quiet, emotional, deeply human. Hollywood soon followed, and throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Gibson became one of the most successful actors in the world. Movies like Lethal Weapon turned him into a pop culture icon, but even there, his characters carried pain beneath the jokes and explosions. At the height of his fame, Gibson began to move behind the camera, driven by a desire to tell bigger, riskier stories. Braveheart was the turning point. As director and star, he delivered a powerful, emotional epic that won major awards and proved he was more than just a movie star. He had vision, he had courage, and he was willing to take risks others avoided. That willingness only grew stronger with films like The Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto. These movies were controversial, intense, and deeply personal. They shocked audiences, divided critics, and made enormous impact. But alongside success came downfall. In the mid-2000s, a series of public incidents involving alcohol, legal trouble, and harmful words severely damaged Gibson's reputation. Hollywood turned away. For years, he was largely absent from major films, becoming a cautionary tale of talent undone by personal failure. Slowly, carefully, he returned, not as a superstar, but as a filmmaker seeking redemption. Hacksaw Ridge reminded audiences of his skill and discipline. By the time he reached his 70s, Mel Gibson was no longer chasing applause. He was reflecting. And it was from this place, older, quieter, more aware, that he finally chose to speak about Val Kilmer. When Mel Gibson speaks about Val Kilmer, the tone changes. The words become more careful. This is not a celebrity praising another celebrity. This is one artist recognizing another. Gibson says Val Kilmer was never just another actor. He was someone who changed the energy in a room simply by being there. According to Gibson, Kilmer possessed a rare kind of intelligence, not just intellectual, but emotional and spiritual. He did not perform characters, he became them. That kind of commitment made people uncomfortable. It also made his work unforgettable. Kilmer's career was marked by bold choices. He played iconic roles, yet never chased approval. While Hollywood often labeled him as difficult or intense, Gibson saw a different truth. He saw a man who cared deeply about meaning. Kilmer was not interested in fame for its own sake. He was interested in honesty. Gibson explains that when people do not understand someone, they often reduce them to a stereotype. Val was complex, curious, and deeply thoughtful. His intensity came from caring too much, not too little. As time passed, Kilmer faced one of the greatest challenges any actor could imagine. Throat cancer took away his voice, the very tool that had defined much of his power on screen. Gibson describes this loss as especially cruel. Val's voice carried authority, humor, warmth, and vulnerability. To lose it was devastating. But what impressed Gibson most was how Kilmer responded. He did not give up. He adapted. He found new ways to express himself, to create, to communicate. That, Gibson says, is the true mark of an artist. Watching Kilmer continue despite physical limitation forced Gibson to reflect on his own life. Both men had faced public judgment. Both had been misunderstood. Both had paid heavy prices for their intensity. Gibson admits that shared experience created a quiet bond, even if they were not constantly in touch. With age comes perspective. Gibson says time strips away ego. What remains is respect. Respect for those who showed up fully, even when it cost them something. In Kilmer, Gibson sees courage. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind. The kind that endures pain without bitterness. The kind that refuses self-pity. As Kilmer's health struggles became public, many saw tragedy. Gibson saw strength. He saw a man redefining himself rather than disappearing. For Gibson, Kilmer represents a generation of actors who believed art was not meant to be comfortable. They believed risk mattered. They believed truth mattered. And they accepted that honesty often comes with consequences. Gibson believes Kilmer's legacy will last long after headlines fade. His work carries something raw and fearless, something real, and that cannot be copied. In a world increasingly focused on image and safety, Kilmer stood apart. He remained himself, even when it made life harder. That is what Gibson admires most. This is not about nostalgia, recognition of a fellow traveler on a difficult path. When Gibson speaks now, there is no bitterness, only gratitude. Gratitude for having shared an era with someone who reminded the world what commitment truly looks like. Kilmer's story, through Gibson's eyes, becomes more than a career summary. It becomes a lesson about resilience, dignity, and staying true to oneself when everything else falls away. As Mel Gibson reaches 70, his words no longer feel like headlines designed to shock or provoke. They feel like reflections shaped by experience. He has lived long enough to see fame rise and fall, to watch public opinion change, and to understand how fragile reputation can be. In this stage of life, Gibson is less interested in defending himself and more interested in honoring truth. Speaking about Val Kilmer becomes a way of speaking about survival, humility, and the cost of being fully alive in a public world. Gibson acknowledges that both he and Kilmer were shaped by intensity. That intensity brought success, but it also brought pain. In youth, intensity can look like arrogance. In age, it often reveals itself as passion. Gibson seems to understand that now. He talks about legacy not in terms of awards or box office numbers, but in terms of integrity. What matters, he says, is the work left behind and the courage shown along the way. Kilmer's journey, marked by artistic risk and personal struggle, stands as an example of that courage. Even after losing his voice, Kilmer refused to disappear. He adapted, expressed himself through writing, art, and presence. Gibson finds that deeply moving. It reminds him that life does not end when circumstances change. It only demands transformation. Looking back, Gibson does not pretend to be perfect. He does not rewrite his past. Instead, he speaks from acceptance. Acceptance of flaws, acceptance of consequences, acceptance of growth. This is why his words about Kilmer feel sincere. They are not performative. They are grounded. They come from someone who knows what it means to be judged, forgiven, and still misunderstood. Gibson believes that true artists are often uncomfortable people. They ask difficult questions. They refuse simple answers. They make others uneasy because they reflect truths many would rather ignore. Val Kilmer did that through his performances and through his life. That is why his work endures. In the end, Gibson offers a simple statement. He says he has nothing but admiration for Val Kilmer, for his talent, his spirit, and the way he faced adversity without losing himself. That statement carries weight because it comes without drama, no scandal, no apology tour, just respect. At 70, Mel Gibson understands that time takes almost everything. Youth fades, power fades, fame fades. What remains are moments of honesty and connection. His words about Val Kilmer are not meant to rewrite history. They are meant to acknowledge it. Two artists, two complicated lives, two men shaped by intensity, struggle, and persistence. This is not a story about perfection. It is a story about endurance. And in that sense, it speaks to something universal. We all face loss. We all face judgment. What defines us is how we respond. Val Kilmer responded with courage. Mel Gibson now responds with reflection. And in that quiet exchange, there is something rare. Not a revelation, but a reckoning. A reminder that legacy is not about being flawless, but about staying human to the very end. As the years pass, stories like this begin to feel less like celebrity news and more like quiet lessons about life itself. Mel Gibson's reflections on Val Kilmer are not meant to change public opinion or rewrite history. They exist in a softer space, one shaped by time, loss, and understanding. When people reach their later years, the noise fades. What once felt urgent becomes distant. What once felt important becomes small. He no longer measures success by applause or power, but by endurance, by honesty, by whether a person remained true to themselves when circumstances tried to erase them. In Val Kilmer, Gibson sees a man who never fully surrendered his identity, even when life took away the tools that once defined him. Losing one's voice is not just a physical loss for an actor. It is emotional, psychological. It challenges the very idea of self. And yet Kilmer adapted. He accepted what had changed, without letting it destroy what remained. Gibson believes that is something most people never truly learn how to do. They cling to who they were, instead of discovering who they can still become. Kilmer chose a different path. He found new ways to communicate, new ways to express emotion, new ways to stay present in the world. That choice, Gibson says, deserves respect. It takes courage to continue when attention fades. It takes strength to accept silence in a world that rewards noise. As Gibson looks back on his own life, he recognizes how easily success can disappear, and how slowly wisdom arrives. Fame does not prepare a person for loss. It often hides them from it until it arrives without warning. Gibson admits that for many years he confused intensity with control and conviction with certainty. Time corrected that illusion. Pain refined it. Reflection completed it. Speaking about Kilmer is not just about admiration. It is about recognition. Recognition that both men walked difficult roads shaped by ambition, pressure, and expectation. Recognition that mistakes do not erase talent, and suffering does not erase dignity. Gibson understands now that life is not divided into heroes and villains, successes and failures. It is far more complicated. People carry contradictions. They evolve. They break. They rebuild. Kilmer's story in this sense mirrors the story of many artists who give everything to their work and pay a price for that devotion. They are praised when they shine and abandoned when they struggle. What Gibson wants people to remember is not the headlines, but the humanity beneath them. He wants Kilmer remembered not as a difficult figure or a tragic one, but as a fearless one. Fearless in his choices, fearless in his honesty, fearless in continuing when the world expected him to fade away. As Gibson speaks, there is no anger toward Hollywood, no bitterness toward critics, no resentment toward the past, only acceptance. Acceptance that life unfolds as it does, not as we plan.